All right. Hello, everyone. Salam, namaste, adab, and welcome to today's event. Today, we are going to hear on atrocity in New and on racialization, Islamomisia, and the human right, uh, which is given by Dr. Angana P. Chatterjee, a very well-known anthropologist from University of California, Berkeley. Introductory remarks and a detailed formal introduction will be given by Zaus Salam Saab, who is a well-known journalist, columnist, and senior editor in Hindu and Frontline. And the concluding remarks will be given by Dr. Amarjit Singh, a scholar and emeritus at Ohio University, not the Ohio State University. This is Ohio University in Athens. And now he's retired and works as a emeritus from from Texas. So welcome you all. And now I invite Zia for the formal introductory remarks. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody, and good morning in the US and Canada, wherever you are. Thank you, Dr. Razi, for giving me the privilege of speaking here today and introducing Dr. Angana Chatterjee. I don't think for most of you, and even here, she needs an introduction. But the subject of today is very interesting and very topical. Atrocity in Nu. And I guess most of us are aware what happened in Nu earlier this year in the months of July and August, when for the first time since 1947, that area recorded that scale of massive communal violence, targeted communal violence at India's largest minority. A number of places of worship, property were damaged or attacked, and there was loss of innocent life. All this was deeply disturbing, quite unsettling, but it was unfortunately entirely predictable. I say this because post 2016, when Pehlu Khan was lynched in the Mewat area, this particular area has recorded highest number of lynching instances since the Modi government came to power in 2014. Only the first and the best recorded instance of lynching was in Dadri in western UP. Otherwise, most of the significant lynching instances came in the Mewat region, of which Nu is a part. There were instances from Alwar and from western UP and different other regions of Haryana as well. So the atmosphere was being gradually built up against the minority. Initially, Muslim men were attacked on the allegation of cow slaughter or even because they were transporting cattle, and it was just concluded that they're transporting cattle for the purpose of sacrifice, for the purpose of slaughter. And obviously, the powers that be decided to stay quiet. We didn't have any response from the Prime Minister of India condemning any of the instances. And we had the sad spectacle of Haryana Home Minister asking for FIRs to be filed against the victim. And in Rajasthan, the then Chief Minister Vasundhara Raje Scindia's government went a step further and they actually filed FIRs against the victims also. Though fortunately, they were soon after withdrawn. So that kind of climate of hatred against Muslims was being built in this particular area since 2016 April when Pehlu Khan was the first victim. After that, we had the case of Ragbar and many others who paid with their life in the same region. However, the things started coming to a head post COVID, first round of COVID in 2020, where immediately when the first threat had subsided, Haryana hosted the so-called hosting of Mahapanchayat. In Mahapanchayats in 2020, 21, and then in 22, and in between multiple smaller panchayats also. Hindutva leaders gathered over there and raised cries for economic boycott of Indian Muslims. They were open threats of violence, rather incitement of violence against people of Mewat, against Muslims of Mewat. Yet, in all the cases, the police acted, either ignored them, or even when these people were booked, they were booked under the more lenient clauses of the law. It was something which had probably emboldened people like Monu Manesa to go ahead and did what he did in February this year, when two Muslim men were killed on not on the allegation of cow slaughter, but merely because there was some suspicion that they could do it in the foreseeable future. Then we had this sorry spectacle in towards the end of July and early August, when Nu reported the worst communal violence since 1947. Any loss of life, any attack on property is disturbing, quite unsettling, but this one was more so, because this is one place where Muslims and Hindus have had a peaceful coexistence, and Muslims have lived a very syncretic life in that particular part of the country. They, if we go back in time, this is the area where Akbar's Deen-e-Ilahi and Surah Kul was widely propagated and practiced, and we see it in the names of Muslims over there, particularly those who are educationally and economically backward people over there. It's not unusual to come across people's names like Bhima Sheikh, Sunil Ahmed, Rahul Khan, and so on, because these people retain their the culture of Hinduism from where they had come to adopt Islam. They retain those cultural practices, those traditions. At the same time, they started offering their namaz regularly, and they became practicing Muslims as well. It was a unique case where an Indian Muslim could continue to follow the practices of Hinduism and still be regarded as a complete Muslim by everybody around. That is why probably we have to give some credit to the founders of Tablighi Jamaat, who brought these people to the masjids, etc., but not at the cost of causing any social upheaval or any disturbance in the society. The Muslims and Hindus of Mewat and Nu continued to have not just a peaceful coexistence, but a healthy relationship when it came to social affairs, economic affairs. And when there is social harmony and economic progress, this is something which the Hindu right wing is quite opposed to. So Haryana was projected as the next Gujarat. Unfortunately for the right wing over there, things did not work out that way. And when I spoke to some of the responsible officials, obviously off the record, they admitted as much that the idea was to play up the Hindu majority against the Muslim minority, or where the Muslims were in a majority in certain parts of Nu, then play up the wider Hindu majority of Haryana against them. Fortunately, that did not take place, and we had the wonderful spectacle of panchayats standing up for Muslims when Muslim traders were sought to be banished from certain villages for their trade, and calls were made to attack other masjids also, not just in Nu, but also in places like Palwal, Gurgaon, and Faridabad. Talking of Gurgaon, we had a similar experience before Nu, but because that was a more cosmopolitan part of the state and very much, so to say, a global city, the violence did not take the shape what we experienced in Nu. For last 3 years, the Hindutva Brigade had been asking Muslims not to pray in any designated public space also. If I can take you back in time, till about 2020, there were 137 sites in which the Muslims could offer their Friday prayers. And because of the constant complaints of Hindu Sena and other right-wing bodies, the number of these prayers, official prayer sites, was brought down from 137 to only 34, finally settling for 21. And when the Hindutva Brigade continued with its protests and even violence at a number of places, the number of prayer sites allowed for Muslims on Fridays was brought down to 18. I'm sure when Dr. Angana Chatterjee will speak about it, she'll throw more light on the subject and much more incisive, much more in-depth work, for which she has been renowned. I have never had the privilege of meeting her in actual life, but I have been fortunate to listen to her on YouTube and read many of her works here in India. She's a very soft-spoken person, but her word travels a long way. If you speak to people who know what it is to take on the right wing, to take on the Hindutva lobby in India, even when you're based in the US, her name is one of the foremost ones. I attended one of her sessions here when she was, I guess, one of the speakers along with Anuradha Vasin, and it left a deep imprint on me. And I'm sure she'll bring the same expertise here when she talks of majoritarianism and the atrocity in Nu. I'm particularly interested in listening to her on Islamomisia because this is something which Indian Muslims experience on a regular basis. Over to you, Dr. Chatterjee.
Thank you so much, Zia Sahab. It was really a privilege for me to share this space with you, as with Dr. Amritjit Singh. And Razi Sahab, thank you as always for hosting these incredible forums where we can actually breathe and think and try to make sense of what is unfolding in the place we come from, in diaspora, and now globally. Zia Sahab, you set a powerful context and illuminated on a number of points, which makes my task easier. I request all of you to kindly excuse me because this is research in progress. It's a work in progress that I'm presenting from to try and make sense of what I'm learning. I've been doing interviews with survivors and other community leaders in Nu and trying to understand what actually happened and to overlay that with respect to, or on sort of the larger strategies of securing India as a Hindu and authoritarian state. So please bear with me, and I want to think through a few fragments here today. All right. I will try to speak for about half an hour so we can have more time for discussion. And if some of the language is academic and bears greater unpacking, please don't hesitate to let me know, and I will do my best to do so. So I want to start by looking at the archaeologies of governance deployed by the Narendra Modi-led government that are focused on weaponizing religion, law, and politics to employ populism, nationalism, and majoritarianism, and unremitting hostility towards social dissent, to incite Hindu nationalists to unparalleled illiberal dominance. The complicity and participation of Hindus in this process cannot be discounted, in fact, must be underscored. As I had noted a while ago, the government's actions have enforced states of emergency across the country and across India-held Kashmir. The methods used to propel contemporary Hindu nationalist politics and priorities were set in motion a while ago. Systems of meaning were proliferated to challenge both truth and history. Perspectives and political experiences were contoured to manufacture the majoritarian subject and set in motion Hindu cultural nationalism. Assembly elections, or rather state elections, since the mid-1990s have been crucial to the future aspirations of the BJP, both regionally and at the center in Delhi. The emergence of leaders like Amit Shah and Yogi Adityanath helped address the tensions and strategies prevalent in between far-right Hindu nationalist organizations who are currently unconstrained by political and cultural constitutional obligations, and the pre-2019 parliamentary BJP. Ideological differences between the BJP and maximally far-right leaders of Hindu nationalism served to signal the increasing legitimation of hyper-authoritarian imperatives within the party and the movement at the national and state levels, and sanction extremist segments of the movement and within civil and political society. We can trace the continuities and shifts in methods and experiments used by the Hindu right to deracinate religious minority communities, Dalits and Adivasis. Castification and Hinduization have been integral to the amalgamation of nationalist politics in India. The unrelenting prevalence of the Hindu male in society and culture also rendered Hindutva as India's manifest destiny. The othering of subaltern communities mediated by caste, religion, ethnicity, gender, sexuality, ability, and class in the Constitution, as well as laws, policies, political economy, and public imaginary, have been formative of national governance. Patriotic Hinduism deepened because of such prejudice. The targeting of Muslims in India today is motivated through hatred, misya, and not fear, phobia. Goose-stepping to conformity, millions across the dominant Hindu community foment Islamomisia, the hatred of Islam and Muslims, which is more accurate than Islamophobia, fear of Muslims in the Indian context, where deep and meaningful intimacies of culture, language, history, soul, poetry, sacrifice, genius, contributions, and meaning render integral Muslims to South Asia and to what is or can be India today. Fear assumes the unknown. It also assumes states of derangement, whereas whereas hatred is an agency that is amalgamated and, how shall I put it, that is amalgamated, created, roused, energized, fictionalized, represented to create the construct of the Muslim as both other and to be feared, as militant, as anti-national, as an enemy both within and outside. A massive propaganda machine spits political lies to bolster this image, to bolster hate, energize pernicious fault lines and cycles of violence, activating Hindu militias and political majoritarianism. New is the latest example of or exemplification of this machinery, both political and propaganda machinery at work. The significance and scope of the Hindu as majoritarian, the nationalist Hindu, is not merely prefatory to the BJP or the Sangh Parivar's current ascendants. Rather, it has been fundamental, I contend, to India's body politic. The translation of the above premise to political strategy has been used to varying degrees by the dynastic Congress government in configuring India as an emergent regional power. The discontinuity between the Congress and the BJP lies perhaps in the degree to which Hindu ascendancy was prioritized or kept in check by previous governments, including the BJP central government of 1998 and 2004, during which time the pogrom in Gujarat took place, and the current BJP Modi government's actions in fascizing majoritarian politics. The BJP and Sangh Parivar's arrival post-2014 is born of a multitude of convergences. Contingent to this is perhaps the long and deeply held commitment that extends well beyond the Hindu right that Hindus are privileged to India. Hindu cultural dominance is the historical and political precursor to Hindu majoritarianism. It is both an uncensored and submerged or suppressed legacy, elemental, I would contend, to the very construction of modern and colonial, post-colonial India, or post-colonial but continuing colonial traditions, India. Hindu cultural dominance permeates the national ethos and vogue in ways that are simultaneously unproclaimed and loud. It has shaped dominant culture in representations and celebrations of what is India and in the pervasiveness of caste, for example, in politics and ideology, in law enforcement. The racialization of Muslims and Islamomisia exemplify discursive and performative strategies that are increasingly infused with authoritarian and genocidal even intent, wherein the racialization of difference is weaponized through repressive government. Political violence, always gendered, operates with deep impunity in this India through exclusionary changes to the law, juridical breakdowns, the use of governmental authority to induce suffering, and through vigilantism, both political vigilantism and mob vigilantism. Since their second electoral victory, current second electoral or recent second electoral victory in 2019, the Modi and Bharatiya Janata Party-led government has prioritized to forge the Hindu national community, predicated on the breakage of minoritized Muslims and Christians and Adivasis and Dalits and Sikhs and others. In India-administered Kashmir, it has furthered coloniality through land occupation to potentially reconstitute demographics and endanger Kashmiri claims to self-determination. In 2023, the massified violence against Muslims in the continuing presumptive statelessness of Muslims in Assam and indigenous Christian dislocation through land occupation in Manipur are three of multiple encounters mobilized by the state apparatus and grassroots militias of Hindu nationalism. Through these experiments and pogroms, the Hindutva movement attacked Muslim citizenship while igniting the decimation of indigeneity and the Christian community elsewhere. Through these experiments, the assemblage of absolute nationalism deploys exclusionary determinations of homeland and is accelerated by populist globalization of Hinduism. This seemingly contradictory architecture of both a homeland that is deeply nationalist and a populist globalization weaponizes religion and culture to pose Hindus as authentic and non-Hindu others as anti-national, insurrectionist, and outsider. Recent Hindutva mobilizations started there approximately since 1992 with the active Hinduization of the people and law enforcement. The last 15 years particularly have been critical in manufacturing the events that led to NU of July 2023. To undermine the community in Mewat, these mobilizations started to lead to the events that repositioned the Muslim and composite syncretic history of Muslims in the area as Islamist, or read anti-national. In 2009 and 2010, Hindu nationalists attempted to militarize the area and pose the Muslim community as instigators. So Hindu nationalists, we saw mobs formulating, we saw Hindu nationalist organizations proliferating, we saw membership growing in these organizations, and we saw acts of violence, acts of how shall I say, acts that sought to position Muslims as hating of Hindus and wishing them ill. Actions that were instigated and popularized and fomented by Hindus themselves, but then Muslims were blamed for these attacks and Muslims were represented as their instigators. Since 2009 and 10, we saw a proliferation of such actions in the area. 3 Muslims were lynched in the new area as well, following 2014. Cow vigilantes constituted the Mewati gangs in the area, and they also participated in attacking homes and in proliferating sexualized violence in the area. In 2016, the Mewat district was renamed NU to mark the locality as Muslims. So I would contend that this renaming of Mewat as NU was actually to signify, or rather to send a coded signal that both organizing against Muslims in the area and the vulnerability of Muslims in this area was the dog whistling that was proliferated and permeated through grassroots Hindu nationalist organizations and their leaders. It left the community vulnerable. It signaled them as there, being readied for an attack. In 2023, beatings, a murder, and a custodial death took place targeting Muslims in New. The Muslim community was terrorized and anguished by these events. On July 31st of this year, approximately a mob of 3,000 to 4,000 persons descended on New, roaring, "Muslims will die," and "Ram, Ram." Going back, in 2016, the renaming, as I said, was an act of targeting the community and both isolating them and singling them out for violence. Health institutions and education institutions remained weak in the locality. The police were on often, while these acts of violence started escalating in the area on those days or preceding those events or immediately after, we saw police or law enforcement being on leave or being called away, and this was similarly the case in July and August of this year. On July 27th of this year, inputs were received on social media that the atmosphere was heating up, and it appears that decisions were taken to not act upon those rumors circulating, or to not investigate those rumors as they were circulating, and to let the violence commence. 3-4 days after the violence, the razing of homes of the poor happened without any notice. They were razed without authorization, and about 1,200 homes were decimated. A PIL was filed in the High Court. Rehabilitation and reparation have not been attempted by the state, and the people continue to be massively dispossessed. They also continue to be displaced on a regular basis, including through today. Members of the targeted Muslim community of New has appealed to the mobs responsible for the violence that they cease and desist, and has appealed to law enforcement that those responsible for perpetrating the violence be punished, and the state has failed to act on this. The Muslim minority is being singled out there as a space and as a community for their further targeting by the authorities and Hindu right leaders and politicians. New is being mobilized as a political agenda to render the community of Mewati Muslims as a targeted community and to position them as mini Pakistan and again as anti-nationals. The racist discourse has been proliferating and pervasive, organized and as monstrous as the violence that followed. It has indeed spun out of control, and hate speech preceded, continued, and went forward after the violence abated in July and August. Hate speech has continued. Falsified statements continue to circulate, and deception surrounds the investigations of the atrocity. Swarms of Hindu militias had stormed the town that day in July and after, supported by Hindu nationalist leaders and central and state governments. The silence of upper caste and class Hindus and the complicity of institutions and state forces. Reportedly, 6 persons died, including Muslim cleric, and scores were injured in New. Alongside these events, the deracination and desecration of structures meaningful to Islam and to the Muslim community have taken place in New area, and there is no recording of such events. The violence was reportedly provoked by Hindu nationalist groups raising incendiary slogans that predated July and August by 4 to 6 months. A cow vigilante who stands accused of instigating the violence in the area has a deep following, and those followers still today remain to be investigated. I'm wondering, before I continue into the event, if we should do something somewhat different and stop and see if anyone has any questions. I will not answer the questions, but I wonder if I can take some questions which will help me determine to what extent I should delve into the events of early August. Razi Saab, what do you think? Is that a good idea?
Yeah. Well, people are free to, maybe they can write in the chat box. That would help. But
Perfect. That would be wonderful.
they're
Okay.
not used to jump in while the talk is going on. Maybe they can
Okay.
write in the chat,
Perfect.
and moderator will use them as the questions.
Perfect.
You can also read, if you can read while talking. I don't know.
I will try. I will try. Thank you. That would be excellent. I want to go through some of the events, and then I want to come back to the discourses that proliferated. And then I want to look at sort of the ways in which popular discourse, dog whistling by the leaders of the Hindu right, the mob organizations, sort of culminate in the proliferation of Islamomisia. In early August, it was reported that 6 persons died due to communal violence. The reportage is always interesting because when it labels events as communal violence, it does not actually talk about the fact that it is Hindu violence on Muslim that targeted and killed members of the Muslim community. And I would contend that for purposes of looking at India today, the notion of communal violence, the terminology is far inadequate, because communal assumes parity between communities. It does not actually take into consideration that one community is supported and bolstered, or the actions of one community is supported and bolstered by the state apparatus, that being the Hindu community, while Muslims are targeted. I would contend that it is active racialization of Muslims by Hindus that lead to racialized violence. So I would contend that the term communal violence, we scrutinize why we are using it and try to find language that adequately gives meaning to the events on the ground. The 6 persons who died due to violence, due to the organized pogrom, included an imam, 2 home guards, and a Bajrang Dal member. I would also want to point out that all of the violence in recent history has been organized. There are spontaneous acts of terror when these events explode, but their logics, the resources that are required to have them be carried out, the ways in which they are constituted, where local leaders and national leaders corroborate in giving a call to violence. The mobilizations take place, the violence actually is enacted, law enforcement play a certain part or are absent significantly. All of this happens with deliberate intent. None of it is spontaneous. What is spontaneous are the acts of terror beyond the sort of their organization. They erupt, and that certainly there's spontaneity there. But these are organized acts. These are pogroms. The violence began during Brij Mandal Yatra, organized by the Bajrang Dal and the VHP, the Vishwa Hindu Parishad, in News Mewat town. In late July, Mohit Yadav, who is also known as Monu Maneswar, was wanted for the alleged killing of 2 Muslims. And this person reportedly used social media to encourage Hindus to take part in this yatra. Cow Vigilante, the organization of cow vigilantes in this area also presents a challenging and important study. Cow Vigilante, Bittu Bajrangi, as they are known, announced that he would travel to New. On July 31st, the General Secretary of the Vishwa Hindu Parishad delivered an inflammatory and anti-Muslim speech in Mewat. Also on that day, when a procession passed through New, local Muslims, it was reported, threw stones at participants. Hindus took shelter at a temple, it was reported, and the Muslim mob stayed a good distance away from the temple, according to the temple priest. On July 31st, social media videos showed a gunman firing from the temple complex, along with local police personnel close by, who did not respond. Also on that day, another Bajrang Dal leader, Neeraj Bhatts, used social media to call Hindus to target Muslims. On August 1st, in Gurugram's sector, recently renamed Gurugram's Sector 57, a mob that was approximately 100 persons strong torched a mosque and killed a deputy imam, Muhammad Said. A separate mob in Badshahpur burned down 2 shops. On August 1st, the then Haryana state government announced that it would be suspending mobile internet until that Wednesday in Gurugram, Faridabad, and Nuh. On August 1st in the evening, more mobs torched several shanty towns and a business in Sector 70. On August 2nd, Bajrang Dal and the VHP held rallies across Delhi using incendiary anti-Muslim rhetoric. Also on August 2nd, Bajrang Dal leader was Pradeep Sharma, was killed by a sharp object near Sohna town, making his way to Gurugram. On August 2nd, in Nuh, there were attempts to torch 2 mosques through the town while it was under curfew. More incidents of vandalism and arson continued, as did reportedly targeted sexualized violence. On August 2nd, Chief Minister of Haryana requested for more security teams from the central government. Central forces were already deployed in Faridabad, in Gurugram, in Nuh, and in Palwal. On August 3, the Haryana police reported 41 FIRs, that it had received 41 first information reports, made 116 arrests, and 90% were detained. The government lifted the mobile internet blockout temporarily in Faridabad, in Nuh, and in Palwal. I think I'm getting close to my time limit, but I wanted to say, make a couple of comments.
So you can it's up to you. I mean, you can continue for a while. Okay. It's all up to you. Yeah.
That's very kind. Thank you. I'm hoping that we'll have discussion, but yes, I will take a little longer. One of the things that I wish to mark about the chronology that I cited is that often the propaganda machinery, which is extremely strong because it has implicated in it political leaders, a robust media at its disposal, and mobs on the ground, often incendiary acts committed by Hindu mobs or Hindu vigilantes are repositioned or represented as acts being committed by Muslims and popularized. And as it is popularized, it becomes a call for the further targeting of Muslims, which happens parallel to the spate of targeting that is already unleashed on a particular space. There also the activity of cow vigilantes who have termed Mewat to be the beef belt has been very interesting. It has repositioned the history of Muslims in Nuh, in Mewat, as people deeply committed to their culture, as communities deeply committed to their culture, to their religion, and to a syncretism, as Zia Saab mentioned or noted, as to a syncretism and to a life that was lived in alliance, in solidarity, and in community with others. This has been re-authored, this history has been revisioned to position Muslims of Mewat as singularly anti-Hindu and as looking to consolidate their position in an area, and this similar discourse has been used in other places such as Uttar Pradesh, that Muslims have been organizing to capture power and hold on to power, and therefore it is to break down that power which poses a threat to Hindus that Hindu mobs must act. So that's also discourse that we are seeing used, we are seeing having been used in Nu, and that continues till today. It is also important to underscore that Muslim workers and laborers who are poor, economically disenfranchised communities have been leaving the area out of fear for their lives. There has also been a demolition drive initiated by the government against Muslim-occupied homes in Nu. The periodic suspension of internet and SMS messages in Nu, like in other places across India and certainly in Indian-administered Kashmir, has had grave impact, including on the morale of the community, because it has been unable to communicate to each other. By about mid-August, between 3,000 and 5,000 members of the Muslim community had fled the area in the aftermath of the violence. I wanted to note that as well. I want to go back now to talk a little about the breakage of worlds, and the breakage of worlds in which Hinduization through the incorporation of politics and history has led to a dispersed strategy of targeting the Muslim community with respect to its political economy, with respect to its history, with respect to violence, with respect to the integrity, physical integrity and security and safety of its members, including and particularly women members, and also its sense of self. The conversations I have had in Nu with persons there after the violence left, I'm trying to find the right language to say this, left me with a sense of their deep bereavement and a sense of breakdown that was beyond the breakdown of physical bodies and homes. It was the breakdown of a history, of a people, the breakage of a sense of their entitlement and right to a place, the dispossession of Muslims of Nu from their homeland. And there are parallels to this with what is occurring in Assam, what is occurring in Manipur, what is occurring in other places as well. But in Nu, while speaking with community members there, the anguish of the community as well, at having been sort of the massive erasures of their history, of the kind of community that they were, of who they sought to be as people, of why it was important for them to be Muslims, and what it meant for them to be Muslims that call India home. The evisceration of that history, the erasure of that history, has left a bereavement which people have reiterated to me goes far beyond sort of what can be healed through the rebuilding of their homes or the mourning of their dead. Islamomisia, according to community members in Nu, the hatred of Islam is proliferated or is commenced with a particular intent that is both literal as it is figurative. It is for the extermination they feel of their community, the Muslim community, not just the extermination, their physical extermination, opposing a physical threat, but it is also the existential extermination of Muslims from Nu and from India today. I want to stop here so we can perhaps have conversation with maybe just another comment that Hindutva's production of culture and nation has escalated, and it is celebrated by breakdown, rupture, and violence. Hindu nationalists bestow a hyper-nationalism with extrajudicial authority, instantiating Hindutva as destiny that resolves the inherited problems of the Muslim across spaces where the national commitment now operates through the weaponization of religion. I also want to make another comment about the growth of leaders in NU on the ground and growth of organizations and the weaponization of these organizations and the growth of the militia base, which has seen a significant increase for the last 2 years. India today is at the brink of a catastrophe that perhaps will result, unless it is stopped, in its own breakdown. And the genocidal intent, and I use that word with caution and with extreme care, but the genocidal intent of this breakage, of which NU is an exemplification, is something that we need to take with the utmost extreme seriousness and intervene on. I will stop here, and I thank you again for indulging me. This is very much, as you can see, a work in progress. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Let's first hear our distinguished professor for the concluding remarks, and after that we will come to the question and answer session. So we welcome now Professor Amarjit Singh for a brief concluding remark. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Razi Saab, and thank you, Angana, for such a well-researched, cogent, thought-provoking commentary on what has been going on in NU and other places. I was particularly struck by the distinction you make between hatred for Islam and Muslims and Islamophobia, which is fear and mistrust of the Muslim body. Whatever I have to offer, Razi Saab and Angana, is kind of footnotes to what Angana has already narrated with great power, with great clarity. And I want to kind of offer in a very cryptic, almost telegraphic fashion, some background notions, and also in this pretty hopeless state of things, some sense of resistance and clarity and of coalitional work. Very small, unfortunately, compared with the size of the majoritarian anti-Muslim hatred project that has been in the works for a while. I appreciated, Angana, that you tried to create a historical background. Many of the things that we are experiencing today did not start in 2014. And except the hatred has been weaponized. And so I want to offer a couple of background comments. For example, we have to remember how Punjab was divided into Punjab and Haryana in 1966. And this may seem not too relevant, but I think it is. And how Jan Sangh, which was the name for BJP at that time, and Arya Samaj campaigned among Punjabi Hindus to declare Hindi to be their mother tongue. As a consequence, Punjab, what we know of Punjab today, turned out to be much smaller state than it would have been if the true Punjabi-speaking stats had been used. There is an irony in all this. The consequence of what the Punjabi Hindus do has affected them more than anybody else. And I'll give you a striking example of it, that since 1966, in Punjab and Haryana, no Punjabi Hindu has been in a leadership position. The current Chief Minister of Haryana is one exception. And he is deeply resented by the Haryana Jats. So lot of the, and then in the Punjab that we have today, which excluded Chandigarh, promised by Rajiv but never delivered, Sikhs are a 52% majority. And in the larger Punjab state that you might have expected, they would have been 48% minority. And I have a thesis that a lot of the issues that the nation, the Sikhs, and Mrs. Gandhi faced in the 80s and 90s, she was gone by 1984, and we don't know about what happened to Sikhs in November 1984. That might not have happened. It would have been a very different thing. Why do I say all this? We have to remember that in Nu, the Jats refused to join the Bajrang Dal and the VHP in the provocation that they were playing out in Nu. And the Sikhs came to the rescue and they saved almost 24 lives. They brought a couple of minibuses and they took away people from being killed. The murders of Muslims around the mosques would have been much worse than they were. So I'm just, as I said, I'm kind of telegraphing. So my sense is that this is a much larger, Nu has to be put in the context of what's going on throughout the country. Angana already mentioned Manipur. I think basically there's a weaponization of the 1947 tragedy. And people have been made to believe that in 1947, Muslims alone were the worst perpetrators of violence. We know as historians of 1947 that that was not true. My own family was warned by a Muslim friend in Rawalpindi. And in my immediate family and in my extended family, nobody died because of the violence, because this Muslim friend, a Hakim in Rawalpindi, well-known Hakim in Rawalpindi, he advised my father to move the family to the eastern side of the border. Fortunately for us, my maternal uncles were rich farmers in Mukassar in Firozpur district, and we were stayed as guests in their homes for almost a year before we moved to Ambala, where I grew up. And there's been so people don't realize that if there are very few Muslims, Nu is an exception, Malerkotla is Punjab in an exception, there are a few pockets of Muslims around Chandigarh, that if there are very few Muslims between Delhi and Amritsar and Deri and Shimla, it's because the Muslims who lived in that area faced the same hard choices that families like mine faced in places like Rawalpindi and other families in Sialkot and Lahore and other places. They were forced to move to the East Punjab. It's not that they wanted to. Similarly, a lot of Muslims, there's a huge number of them, they were not the majority in East Punjab. They were a majority in West Punjab, but they were huge population of Muslims. They were forced to move to Pakistan, even though they did not want to. So this poisoning, this of the 1947 tragedy has been used to win elections. There's no interest in Khalistan in Punjab, but the BJP needs the Khalistan narrative because they have to find some way to treat Sikhs as untrustworthy. Muslims are Pakistanis, Muslims are jihadis. Christians are always converting people through bribes and through pressure, and they are foreigners. According to Savarkar, that's what Hindutva laid down in 1923, and that continues to dominate the framework. So to me, going forward, I think I would say, again, I'm speaking not to the new situation in particular, to the larger situation. Number one, there are no short-term solutions. Think of this as a long-term movement. Think of it as a movement parallel to freedom movement, which took 50 years or 125 years, depending on whether it started in 1857 or it started with Jallianwala Bagh. And so we are looking at a schedule of at least 20 years before we can overcome, and we hope we can overcome. And the second thing that I want to mention is that whatever we give, it comes back in all kinds of promising ways. Mahatma Gandhi was inspired by people like Henry David Thoreau and by John Ruskin. He, in turn, was a major influence on people like Martin Luther King and John Lewis, who passed away only a few years ago, and the John Lewis voting rights is still hanging in abeyance. And Martin Luther King learned about Gandhi from his teachers at Howard University, the African-American, the black school in DC, people like Howard Thurman, who had started going to India in the 1930s, and they brought back the messages of non-violent civil disobedience. I think it's time for us to learn now from the civil rights movement in this country, which means longer stamina. Look at how long it took for African Americans. They were given full freedom in 1863, and then it was taken away from them in 1877 and 1896. And they have been reclaiming it since 1960. A lot of progress has been made, but as we know, much remains to be done. There is much for us Muslims, Sikhs, Christians, enlightened Hindus. A lot of our allies are Hindus. It's not a particular thing. And the syncretism that Angana referenced more than once has been part of our lives. I mean, I remember a little incident from the time when I was 12 or 13 years old. We had very few Muslims, as I said, in Ambala. And even at age 12 or 13, I used to like to go for morning walks. And the only Muslims we would see in Ambala were these people who would sell rugs and carpets. They used to come from Saharanpur. And as I'm walking outside the lived part of the neighborhood, I run into this man who probably didn't have any place to sleep. He slept under a tree. And the first thing we say to each other, me, a young Sikh boy, and he, a middle-aged Muslim man, guess what? Ram Ram Ji. Absolutely no hesitation, absolutely no self-consciousness. There was no question of seeing it as part of some weaponized religious identity. So I think I'll stop with that. I'm sure there are other people waiting to ask questions. Many questions have come in the chat box. And if I'm sure Angana will respond to them. And if there is any way I can come in and say a few more things, I would be happy to do so. Thank you very much, Angana. I appreciated your contribution.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. And before we move to question and answer session, just take out this one, Faisal or Rafat, the current poster. There is no need for this. Anyway, next week.
I have the next one.
All right. So next week we are not scheduled for any talk here at Indian Diaspora because our sister organization, Aligarh Alumni Association is doing the annual Mushara. So please join that annual Mushara instead of waiting for our, we are going to reschedule for 2 weeks from now on Saturday, November 25th with Professor Gyanendra Pandey.
That's great.
And for on the fragments of family, men at home in colonial and post. This is our regular schedule on 25th Saturday. So over to Dr. Rafat Hussain for the question and answer session. Rafat.
Thank you, Dr. Raziuddin, and thanks to all the speakers, Dr. Angana Chatterjee and Ziaul Islam and Dr. Amritjit Singh. It was a wonderful session. And of course, as you can see, there is a lot of interest and the people have put their questions or comments in the chat box. So please raise your digital hand or you put your comment or the question in chat box. I will keep monitoring that. So first one is from Sandeep Narwani Saab. And you may have read that, Dr. Chatterjee. And that is, what are far-right narratives in New?
What are the
far-right?
The far-right
narratives.
narrative of what happened in No.
Okay.
In New.
Certainly. First, I want to thank Dr. Singh for your remarks. They helped set a context and elaborated on the conversation, and I'm really grateful to you. Thank you for those of you that have made comments or raised questions. The far-right narrative, to sum up very briefly, constitutes as such, or is such thusly constituted, that Muslims in New are militantizing, for lack of a better term. They are part of a larger international network of Muslims who wish to see India undermined, who wish harm to India. They cannot be trusted. They are not Indian. They are proliferating into businesses and the political economy of the Hindus and jeopardizing Hindu stability. It's always really interesting how under escalated authoritarian states, you see the narrative of exactly what the dominant is doing to the marginal, repositioned as what the marginal is doing to the dominant, which then requires the dominant to respond. So that is exactly what the narrativization constitutes of. It also acts of violence perpetrated by the Hindu right are positioned as or are narrativized as those in fact undertaken by Muslims. As we know, from 1947 onwards, the Hindu right organizations do not maintain a roster. And because they do not maintain a roster, it has been difficult to call them to account by courts, for example, or to take them to a court saying, show your membership roster, because they tell us that they do not maintain a roster. The way in which they are allowed to grow, the lack of any sanction, the lack of any holding to account, the lack of any accountability. While Muslim organizations, for example, without cause, or Muslim individuals without cause, such as my colleague Khurram Pervez, are charged under the UAPA, organizations have had their FCRAs revoked, allied organizations have had their FCRAs revoked, Sangh Parivar group of organizations have not been investigated, and they need to be investigated for the acts of terror that they have proliferated. Every organized act of violence from my study since 1947 bears the imprint of the Hindu right. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. The next one is, why is this narrative so effective? Why has it spread in the mainstream so quickly? That is from Tariq Faruqi.
Thank you for this question. So this answer is an uncomfortable one. And I wish here to state that I'm of Hindu descent myself. And this has been an area of study because self-reflection is necessary when one lives in a country where one is part of the majority. This narrative has been popularized because I think the way society is constituted in India is deeply segregationalist. Its secularity has been infused with this segregationism, and the dominance of what is Hindu. The sort of discursive formulation that manifests destiny in India, the pathway to that is Hindu. It's the constituting of Hindu as the dominant community itself has required all forms of loss and erasure, such as, for example, the constitution of white in the United States. So the constitution and maintenance of this dominant category, the hegemon of the Hindu, and then its linkage with the state and its ambition to politically and economically be prevalent, be a homogenizing force in Indian society, and the deep gendered and sexualized and economic and casteist and religion-based forms of violence that are everyday, that we pay no mind to, that we simply see as this is part of life. This is not something we need to resist, has all these quotidian inequities, injustices, their massivity has actually laid the foundation to the organization of epical forms of violence. They are popular because to look at them would require what? It would require the dismantling of society as we know it today. To reformulate, to reposition power in Indian society would require no longer the dominance of the Hindu in society. To do that would require ridding society of caste and casteism, to rid it of minoritism, to rid it of all the formulations that have become integral to nation making in India. So it has to be convenient for us, those of Hindu descent, to look the other way, because if we stop looking the other way, we have to be agreeable to losing the privilege that we so unmindfully take for granted.
May I add something?
Of course.
Both the questions, they relate to how majoritarianism becomes operative, how majoritarianism becomes functional. And Angana, you kind of implied, for example, Trumpism in this country is a very similar phenomenon. When it's an amazing feat of mind and kind of cunning political device to convince the majority in this country that they are at risk from immigrants and from Blacks and from Native Americans and others who feel powerless as it is. Same thing in India, that Muslims particularly, but Christians or Sikhs or any of these groups, or even Dalits or Adivasis or women, pose a threat to the majoritarian power. I mean, I have friends from Tamil Nadu and I have friends from Andhra and Telangana, and where the Hindutva social disease incidence is much lower than it is in places like UP and Delhi and neighboring places. And even they say, oh, well, we don't have a Hindu nation. So this is our first chance, our first big chance to create a, look at how many Muslim nations exist, how many Christian nations exist. And we need a nation because Nepal refused, the pushing by India to declare itself a Hindu nation. So there is no Hindu nation. And so India has to become this conceptualize this very willfully, very misleadingly, constructed as a Hindu nation. Yeah, I don't know if that helps, but
No, thank you, Dr. Singh, for your perspective. So the next is Dr. Saeed Zadi, please unmute yourself.
Thank you. So I have what I see is that Muslims has been in this situation probably in most of the world. India has a different problem, so we need to talk about the root cause and the time frame when 200 years ago, when Muslims and all Hindus and Sikhs and Christians, they were living and they were under British Empire, so the enemy was common. And I think the reason they probably still hate each other, but they were living together. So the time frame, is it after partition or before partition? Second is, there are other minorities there which may be weaker or smaller in India. Why they are not targeted the same as Muslims been targeted? Is this the reason? Is the decay in social, educational, cultural? What is the real reason for Muslim? We need to blame ourselves in some way or the form. What is the reason why we are in this situation in India and rest of the world? So can you comment on that? And I think that will be good.
Thank you so much. It's always painful that the targeted community asks itself, are we responsible? How did we do something to invite this on ourselves? I would also, from my study of organized Hindu right initiated violence in India since 1947, other communities have been deeply targeted as well. I was actually in Delhi. I'd just gone to Miranda House. This was my first semester undergraduate in 1984. And I was privileged to go to the camps after and to meet with members of the Sikh community after the program against the Sikh community. I've had the privilege to work briefly in Punjab. I've worked in Orissa for 8 years, mapping from 2003, the violence that actually ended up happening in 2007 and 2008 against the Christian community primarily. Now trying to understand what is happening in Manipur, violences against Dalits and Adivasis, different forms of violence. The Narmada Bachao Andolan is a testament to that, where millions, close to 50 million Adivasis have been displaced from their homelands since 1947. So forms of violence have been inscribed on the bodies, memories, livelihoods of all who is other to a Hindu majoritarian India. Muslims are disproportionate recipients, Muslim communities are disproportionate recipients of that violence because with respect to minority communities, sometimes they are more readily present in certain areas. Also, if there is sort of India as its foil, sees or India as its other, also delegates the Muslim as its predominant, prevalent other. And that has to do with the history of the way in which the country was formed. India, as we know it today, did not exist prior to 1946, regardless of the revisionist history of the Hindu right. So in its formative moment, the enemy of India became Muslim and Islam, and therefore the targeting in order to manifest the logics of this nation state. That's a very brief.
And Muslims are the largest visible minority.
That's what I was saying. Yes.
Numbers.
Yes, that's what I was saying. Yes.
They can be easily conceptualized, targeted as a dangerous element? Are there things that require Muslims as Indian citizens to reflect on? Sure, but I would
Always.
yeah, I would let my Muslim brothers and sisters address that among themselves and share it with us. Definitely, all communities need self-reflection and self-criticism
Absolutely.
from day to day, from week to week, from year to year.
I also wanted to say, if I may, here that the shaping of India has been very, or how shall I say, the subjugation of Kashmir has been very critical to the formation of India. And in it, that relation to Kashmir has also required a certain relation to Muslims in India. And that dynamic, we don't have the time to go into it today, but that dynamic is also something we need to be very mindful of. The orchestration or engineering by Hindu majoritarianists of the Muslim as both the internal and external enemy.
Thank you so much. And thank you for taking care of Nasima and Devadatta's question. You have already addressed them. So before I move on to Nazir Ahmad Saab, I would like to at least ask Islam Siddiqui Saab to get ready for his comments, and maybe Abdul Jabbar Saab. So let's move on to Nazir Ahmad Saab.
Thank you, Rafa Saab. I have always been an admirer of Dr. Chatterjee for her audacious confrontation of the power structure. And I have admired her writings for its courage, conviction, and empirical veracity. My question is rather a broad one. Ever since the advent of virulent nationalism in the 19th century and its current manifestation as majoritarianism, have there been any successful examples of a minority holding its own and affirming and asserting its autonomy in a majoritarian state? And specifically, as it applies to India, we all know its history, what has happened. We have lived through the history. But what counter efforts have been made by the Muslims and the Christians for a mobilization, a counter mobilization? What response do we see, and hope, and what hopeful signs do we see in the counter mobilization, if you please?
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ahmed. Very grateful to you for your kind words. Your question, indeed, yes, it is very broad. I'll just make two quick comments, and I don't know if others my co-panelists would like to weigh in as well. But two things. One is that dominant nationalism is rooted since the late 19th or mid-19th century through the ages of the nation state. In fact, its construction, the rise of this form of nationalism is parallel to the ensconcement of the nation state as sort of the container through which social and political life may be lived. And usually nation states are governed by majoritarian agency for the most part, and where they have been governed by a minority community, it has been the most powerful community. So it has been majoritarian in the sense of having power, possessing power. So therefore, it is very difficult to have a state sans majoritarian agency. I think our understanding of the state and the role it plays in creating the kind of breakages and divide and conquer policies through which we live our lives, also the aggrandizement of power through which it lives. Of necessity, the state is violent. Of necessity, the state is the largest controller of land. And these two make it aggressive and inequitous. Nation states, I would contend, as a model, is an inequitous one. So no, I don't see where enduringly an ethical nation state to exist that is kind to all its people, that is equitous, especially large nation states. And there are evidences. One can always point to Europe, but as people have, but it's problematic because one then would also need to look at colonization and the sort of location and accumulation of resources through which the notion of equity can be fostered. And then, of course, Europe's relation to its other, both internal and external, other to immigrants, etc., again, render that logic compromised. In India, have Muslim communities and others who are targeted and their allies resisted? Of course, yes, the resistance is prolific. And the resistance is uncontained even today. Even people whose homes are bombed out. I'm sorry?
Raised, I said, 443
Yes. Yes.
raised in New, you know.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Whose homes are decimated in New, who are presumptively stateless in Assam. Across the country, the resistance has been prolific. What more can they do? But for those forms of resistances to be successful also requires a profuse resistance on part of the majority community, which is thus far, until now, been absent. And it needs to be far more proliferating, far more profuse, far more uncontained to say, not in my name, not this.
Exactly. May I add something?
Of course.
Yeah, please,
yes.
go ahead.
Yeah. I'm not sure in terms of the question whether I'm answering it directly, but I think there are many examples in democratic societies of and even groups under the colonial regime where minority populations and their leaders have shaped distinctive worthwhile identities. I mean, let's not forget Sir Sayyid Ahmad Khan in Aligarh. That is an excellent example of shaping an identity Anglo-Islamic, just as the Arya Samajis had done the Anglo-Vedic, the DAV schools and DAV colleges. So it's a very parallel thing. Let's not forget the Sikhs' ability to extricate the Gurdwaras from the Mahants in the early 20th century with the help of the British rulers through the Singh Sabha movement. And there are always problems in both the communities. In this country, a kind of work between Martin Luther King and Lyndon Johnson, who supplied the power side of it. We created the Civil Rights Act, 1964. We created the Voting Rights Act, 1965. We creating the Immigration Reform Act because of most of us who live in the United States are able to come and claim US citizenship. So those are trajectories of empowerment that you cannot ignore. Don't ignore also that the Jewish identity in this country right now is under a lot of pressure and a lot of assault. But the Jews have in this country, as a very small minority, exercised a lot of power and a lot of attention has been given to their contributions and their ability to affect the political discourse, which is, of course, still going on. Biden has gone to Israel and given a bear hug to probably the most detested Israeli leader. But on the other hand, look at the people are not with Israel. The governments are with the people. So in India, 200 million Muslims, 45 million Christians, 25 million Sikhs, Dalits, Adivasis. If these groups have ways of coming together in some coalitional structures, they have a lot of power. And the existing power, the powers that be, they are constantly making sure that Dalits and Muslims and Sikhs and Christians don't come together. So I just wanted to lay this out as patterns that exist and patterns we can learn from both here. For me, I'm a student of both America and India, and my mind is constantly working in comparative frameworks.
Also, just one point to add to what you just very thoughtfully elaborated is that perhaps the movement should be to have to carefully figuring out how to render states as more equitable political entities.
Yes.
Simply that. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Rafat, unmute yourself.
Okay, I did. Thank you. So now I invite Dr. Islam Siddiqui. In the meantime, Faisal, please allow Abdul Jabbar Saab to turn on his video. And then I will come back to the people who have raised digital hand. So Islam Bhai, please.
Thank you, Rafat. I had not expected to speak, but thank you for asking me to.
Sorry to put you on his spot.
So can you turn my video on? It says my video has been disabled.
Yeah, that's what I asked. Please, Faisal, I could not do that.
No, you can
But
do
you-
it now. You can do it now. Turn
Okay.
it on.
You
So
can, you can.
Islam
Not
Bhai,
me. I have given the permission, so you can do it on yours.
Okay, I'm doing it now.
Yeah, everybody should be able to do that.
Okay, so thank you so much,
You
Razi
look
and
good.
Rafat.
You look good, Islam Bhai. Good.
Thank you. I'm recovering from my trip to India. Both Tabassum and I picked up something pretty bad, so we have been in isolation, so as to speak. But let me just go to the topic of the day. I am so impressed and visibly moved by the intellectual richness of this discussion. Both Dr. Chatterjee is known for her factual research, and I think she brought that, and also Professor Amarjit Singh also brought some very practical suggestions to find some kind of path forward. So let me just say, I think this is an issue which we need to really, we are the Indian Americans who are here, both of all faiths and persuasion, need to, what I call, people who would like to India to rise as a country, as a constitutional democracy and secular country. I think a lot of common interests where it's worth saving the democracy, which our forefathers gave their lives for. And so what I'm saying to here is this Hindutva movement, which should not surprise anyone. This is not a new phenomenon. It has been going on, work in progress for nearly 100 years. It came to power in 2014, full blown. 2019, it even became more entrenched. And I think this is where a coalition of different faiths and political ideologies should need to combine, who want India to survive and continue as a secular democracy. One thought which I will share with, and this is a scary part of it, if we don't do that, I think it's not going to only affect the minorities, even the majority. People just remember there used to be a country in Europe called Southern Europe, Yugoslavia, a thriving democracy. But guess what happened? When similar ethno-religious thoughts caught force there, that country was destroyed. So people who were born after year 2000 don't even remember there was a country like Yugoslavia. And I think India and all those, especially Hindu majority, folks should know that we need to preserve this democracy. Otherwise, India as multilingual, multi-religious, and sectarian it could become. Those forces of sectarianism can destroy the democracy, which has actually grown since 1947. So I think we all have an interest in protecting it. I really continue to believe that what you are doing, Razi, I think this is a platform which has brought these people of different persuasion, and they are talking about something which we all need to be concerned. But I was in India and I saw what's happening. On the surface, you don't see that, but forces of disintegration are working. And I think this is where we need to actually bring the awareness to the majority community. Look, it's not only the Muslims or Christians or Sikhs, all of us are going to really suffer if India becomes, and that's what President Obama said, unless people of different faiths start talking together, I'm paraphrasing, I think India is going to pull apart. And this is where I want to end my comments.
Thank you so much, Islam Bhai. So, you want to go ahead, please.
Thank you, Ambassador Siddiqui. Always a pleasure and an honor to see you. Thank you for your comments apropos of the present. I think just a small comment that freedom is a practice. And I think once we stop exercising it with diligence and with care, it is taken away from us. And I think that's in part what we are witnessing, that our movements in dissent, our movements for democracy, our movements for freedom and for our rights, for equality, they have to be very vigilant and they have to be profuse in the current context, and they have to be across the board, whether it is in academic contexts or institutions, whether it is amongst civil society, whether it is amongst religious communities, faith-based groups. They have to be profuse and they have to intersect. We have to talk to each other. You're absolutely right. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So let's entertain the first one from the digital hand, and then I will come back to Abdul Jabbar. Dr. Fazal Khan, please. Let's see if he's still there. He's there.
Thank you, Rafat, for the opportunity. Actually, there's one comment and one question. I think as Islam Bhai said, that once you become authoritarian, the country disintegrates. He gave the example. But there are mixed examples over there. On one hand, you see China, authoritarian, and yet he's competing with the United States. But at the same time, look at Pakistan, became so religious. I compare that to Hindutva, and then went down the drain, and India didn't learn with that. So there are mixed examples. I think India is looking to become China, where they think that democracy may be the hindrance for the progress. My second question, though, is that when you talk about Muslims, Christians, Sikhs, Dalits, actually they will never come together. That's a myth. And ironically, those who so-called secular parties, when it comes to Muslims, even their voters are against Muslims. If you go over there, you can feel it. The environment has changed so dramatically that those who were your friends, now they try to avoid because you are Muslim. And it's not that they are BJP supporter, they are Samajwadi supporter, they are other so-called secular party supporters. So either it was there and BJP exploited it, or at least BJP and RSS successfully propagated that hatred and disliking towards minorities. Either way, they have succeeded that. So that's where I feel that getting together is very difficult. What do you think about that?
Thank you.
So yes, sorry. Thank you so much for your comment. Appreciate it. To respond very, Mr. Hussain, may I respond? Is it okay?
Yeah, please go
Thank
ahead,
you.
because they are on.
Thanks. Thank you, Rafat. Thank you. Two brief comments. I think that coming together is for me, I live in, I work as my work as an anthropologist sort of in culture, in community, trying to understand local knowledge and what it means. The sense of coming together does not mean leaving behind either. One can very fully be part of different communities, different identities, and one can also have shared interests that allow for negotiation and a coming together that is partial. That is not complete, that is partial, that is even strategic. I mean, identity is often or hopefully strategic, not identitarian. So just that comment.
Please mute yourselves.
The second comment about anti-Muslim, I think the Congress has sort of the spectrum between soft Hindutva and hard Hindutva, right? All of these parties have traversed that space. And I think that the Congress's, relation to, for example, the Sikh community, relation to Adivasi struggles, relation to Muslim communities, relation to what happened after Gujarat. The country could have gone in a very different way to seek accountability for Gujarat, which it failed to do, and emboldened and bolstered the grassroots build-up of the Hindu nationalist movement tremendously. So I agree with you. And I think the secular, the presumption that the secular is distinct from the majoritarian is also a problematic one. The secular is also inhabited by what is dominant around it. I think it's reasonable to say that in the United States, the secular is imbued with Christianity because it is dominantly Christian. In India, likewise, the secular is also imbued with a certain sense of the priority of Hindus in India because of what is massively around it. And to actually have a secularity that is equitable to all requires a whole different set of priorities and concerns being put forward and movements, social movements being coming forward. Just that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. So there is only.
Yeah, Rafat, maybe you can take one more question and I can come back.
Yeah, Dr. Singh, we are running out of time. So let's see, we have 3 hands raised and then we will be done by that time. So Abdul Jabbar Saab, and then I will invite Shrikant Chopra and Satyanath. That will be the last person. And then I will hand over to Dr. Raziuddin. So
maybe we should take all 3 questions if that's okay. And then we see if we can respond.
Sure. Thank you. Abdul Jabbar Saab, please go ahead, and he has a comment.
Can they go first? Because they raised their hand first. So
No, you, okay.
I can come last. Okay.
Okay, sure. Abdul Jabbar Saab, thank you. Okay, Shrikant Chopra Saab, please be brief and go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, I've been very welcome in your forum and I mostly ask pertinent questions. Today is going to be an important question for you. I'm concerned that we keep using the same postmodern definitions to describe conditions in India. When you say majoritarian democracy, you have election, you have majority, you gain power, you use it. So what's wrong with it? That's number one, okay? Number two is that we need to realize that Hindu community is not unified. Okay, only 31 to 35% of the votes go to BJP. So every time you come around and try to say Hindutva has been there since 47 or 100 years ago, you understand that Hindutva has never gained any traction up in the last 10 years. And even then, most Hindus don't vote for BJP. Only 31 to 35% of people vote for BJP and their groups together. So that's also not true. So to blame the whole Hindu community that they are unified and they are anti-Muslim or they're anti-Christian or the anti-Dalit is not correct. It's wrong. It's mischaracterization. Okay. So
May I say something?
And the third thing is that this postmodernist characteristic or the description that you have, that there's an oppressor and oppressed, there are multiple shades in between in India. People have power without having a political power. They have power with economic power, but don't have political power. So we need to understand the nuances in India and even this country as well. But to say that majoritarianism is wrong and is illegal or illegitimate is not correct. You define it how you define it.
Thank you,
Thank
sir.
you.
We got it. Hold on for a second, and let's ask Satyanath Saab, and then you can respond for both. Satyanath Saab.
Yeah, I put up the question on the
Go
chat.
ahead. Go ahead, please, and say it again. Sorry about that.
Okay, I'll read it. Here.
Let me see.
Yeah, I've heard gladly a good deal about the sentiments expressed against majoritarianism. But how would you replace majoritarian ways, rules, laws, etc.?
Thank you. Got it. Thank you so much. Go ahead, please. And then in the end, I will invite Abdul Jabbar Saab for the comment. So you heard Shrikant Saab and Satyanath Saab.
Angana, you want to go first? I would also like to say something.
You are on mute, Dr. Chatterjee.
So sorry. Yes, absolutely. If I may.
Yeah, and I will add something after you say.
Of course. I think anytime there is a space which is by definition small and fragile, where people gather to talk about what is provenly problematic, dangerous, occurring, I think the ascription that therefore a whole community is being targeted and it must stop is really problematic as well. It's sort of like when we talk about racism and the response is, but you've come here as immigrants, you're being allowed to live, you have a job. Why are you talking about all of us as bad white people? We're actually not. And I happen to be of Hindu descent myself. We're actually not. We're simply having a discussion of events of disproportionate violence, of a state whose leader has in writing talked about his fondness for another leader who has talked about his fondness for the Nazis. So we're simply having a conversation, and that's it. So please don't make ascriptions from this as to a whole community of India and Hindus being targeted, because they're not. And when you talk about postmodern language, I think it begs the question, because there's decolonial, post-colonial, post-structural, various forms of language. And language is not, it's not erasing the particularities and nuances, it's underscoring them. Simply that. And I appreciate that you might have this position and feel that way, and that is completely acceptable. And it's acceptable to have a conversation about it. But I think it should be a conversation rather than simply an assertion that this is what this forum today has comprised of. That is to say, all Hindus are bad, and majoritarianism is problematic. And that majoritarianism is an issue when there are other people within a state is something that has reams of literature on it, not just on India, where myself and two other colleagues, Thomas Blom Hansen and Christoph Jaffrilo, wrote a book called Majoritarian State, published in 2019, but various others. I mean, there's dozens and dozens of critical, excellent literature from across the world on why majoritarianism is an issue that nation states and its communities need to contend with. Thank you.
Do you want to say something about how to replace the majoritarianism?
Yeah, I will say that.
Yes, go.
Okay, go.
Thank you, Angana, for explaining.
Please be brief. Please.
Yeah,
Yeah,
please brief. Because
I will be very brief.
Thank you.
In addition to what Angana has said, the two friends who raised the same question have a total misunderstanding of the word majoritarianism. Majoritarianism is not about denying the majority. Of course, Hindus are a majority in India. And first of all, I think both Angana and I were both very careful. In fact, in many examples I gave, I mentioned that we have and we continue to need allies. There's a difference between majoritarianism and majority. In the parliament, decisions are made by majority and they are final. Majoritarianism is when a group, a population, because they are in majority, they think that they have the right to dictate how other populations will live under that rule. That's what majoritarianism is. It is not an attack on Hindus. It's an attack on a mindset. And that mindset has been particularly displayed. In fact, I forgot to announce a very happy communique from the Prime Minister of India. You know, we have done some beautiful things like changing the name of Allahabad to Prayagraj. So we are now ready to change the name of Aligarh to Harigarh. And so Alia will be called Nalia.
All right.
So that's our way of defining progress. So we are looking at when you cannot produce jobs, when you cannot produce employment for young people, when you cannot deal with sanitation, when you cannot deal with hunger, then you come up with those kinds of distractions. That's part of majoritarianism. Majoritarianism is not an attack on Hindu majority. Please.
All right.
Thank you so much.
I want to actually read one thing, just make one statement in addition. Majoritarianism, as we define in our book, is, and I have defined in my work, I've defined majoritarianism since 2009 in my work, actually, in various texts. It's the assertion by the majority dominant in India, the Hindu community, toward acquiring and maintaining social, economic, cultural, political, religious, legal, and state and nationalist power, where majoritarian aspirations are then linked to truth, the right version of history, national identity, and freedom. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. Razi Bhai, back to you.
So,
Can I make just...
I'm sorry. Very sorry.
That's okay. That's
Abdul
fine.
Jabbar Saab, please. You are the last one.
I think I don't have to add too much here. A remarkable intellectual, passionate discussion. Really thankful for the speakers. I think Dr. Singh referred to southern states. I come from Tamil Nadu, southernmost part of Tamil Nadu too, near Kanyakumari, so Rameshwaram. So when I grew up, there is no distinction. We never made it. Even now, when I visit my place, my village, there is no distinction between how people worship or who they are. But I think still there hasn't changed much in that respect. I think probably there is something about some regions of the country that there is embedded some sort of division, I think, that is being exploited by the political class. That's what I think. I don't know where the time is up, but I think I just wanted to put that out.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. Because you
Thank
are
you, Abdul Jabbar Saab. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's fine.
Just overlooked you. Razi Bhai, Dr. Raziuddin, back to you.
Because Dr. Jabbar is from the southernmost tip, that is Tamil Nadu, and we all know that the south doesn't carry this poison, which the north carries, basically. So you are safe so far. So thank you all very much. And as always, Angana ji was so articulate and so impressive. Let me also clarify to Chopra Saab and others, this forum is never been any platform for Hindu bashing or any bashing. It is a very secular platform. We are just into conversation on the topics, and mostly on, if you see our speakers list, yes, a lot of them are well-known dissenters within Indian democratic setup, and we love to invite them to talk about this issue. We all love this secular ethos of India, and majority doesn't mean that majoritarianism should rule. Majority, yes, of course, we all understand 85% are Hindus. I myself is a product of Banaras Hindu University and Aligarh Muslim University. I know good Hindus and bad Hindus, good Muslims and bad Muslims.
And I know some bad Sikhs.
No, what I'm saying is India, in spite of all that poison, is still remains very much active against the forces of that. It's true that those forces are not ruling at this present time. So, but it's still the, as Angana ji said, that democracy has to be earned on it. You have to be vigilant all the time. So this is a truth, and we have to be vigilant. Otherwise, India is still a better place than what you see many other places. And within the high caste Hindus or high caste others, you will see the dissenters as well as the communal people. What you can do. In West Bengal, a lot of high caste Hindus or low caste Hindus, they are part of Mamata Banerjee. Some of them are in BJP. This is democracy. People choose their way. You have to fight it out. That's all you can do. Okay, and the 5 elections in these states will tell you all a little bit more how much communalism dominates and how much secularism retains its force. And that is all we can say. What else we can say? It is a conversation. It has to be put forth. It has to be fought for. It has to be argued. That's all you can say. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Raziuddin, and that concludes the session. And thank you again for both the speakers and Ziaus Salam Saab. And I know he has left, but thank you again. Thank you so much.
I have a question for Professor Chatterjee.
Yes, Amir Bhai.
Oh, Amir Bhai.
This is unrelated to what we've been talking, obviously very intellectual. You have such a posh British accent, aristocracy like. Have you spent some time as a student or no? Okay.
No, I actually learned English. My mother's first language is not English, neither my father's. My father spoke well. My mother, by her self-definition, struggles with it. I went to an Anglo-Indian school, not a particularly posh one in Calcutta, but with amazing teachers. And because I was interested in theater and did elocution and theater for a while, I would read a lot. out loud with my diction and things like that. And I like to think that, you know, mine is some composite of Indian English, because this is not how the British speak at all. But it's certainly how
Well, it
certain...
came to me. I spent 6 years
Amer Bhai spent some time in England.
as a graduate
Yes,
school in
yes.
England. So
Yes.
your accent struck to me as
No.
Yes, yes.
something I was
No
curious.
doubt, no doubt, Amir Bhai, much closer to British accent, and especially Bengal, knowing Bengalis,
Yeah.
you don't, even Bengal is very educated area, far more educated than others, and they all know English very well, but their spoken form is not very well, really.
Yeah, it's exemplary. Yeah, it
so
is.
yours is remarkably very, very good.
Thank you so much.
So you
And
should
that,
still go in the theater. Should go.
I'm to be announced. We're actually planning something to do with all of this work, so I will let you know if it happens. And I think also in the US, you know, one is very particular to hold on to what I think is my sense of speech, where I come from, or all of that, because this can be very subsuming, and it's a way of holding on to one's sense of self as well. So I think that, but yes, so TBD, if there is a theatre production that might be of interest.
We will stage your play here.
Show, Angana.
We will
Sorry?
1% show.
1%.
No, we will stage your play here.
That would be wonderful. I actually I trained with Faisal Al-Qazi and Amal Elana, whose father, Ibrahim Al-Qazi, founded the National School of Drama, and Anuradha Kapoor, who was also a director at the National School of Drama. So yes, I feel very fortunate about that.
We too
Very excellent session.
We too are going to a stage play today, Gandhi in Jinnah, right here in DC.
Nice.
Oh yeah, that was done long time ago. Is it a revival of that?
I mean,
there was a play, Gandhi and
Yeah,
Jinnah,
they are playing
years
here
ago.
now.
Maybe it is just going around the towns.
Yeah.
But today we have here in these.
Oh, good.
In the DC area.
So well, thank you, Razi Saab, and thank you, Angana, and everybody. Have a good day.
Okay, bye.
माफ कीजिएगा, थोड़ी इनफॉर्मल बात हो रही, तो एक दो जुमले में बोलना चाहूंगा। एक तो ये कि मैं कल हमारे मुल्क को जा रहा हूं, हिंदुस्तान को, एक 4-5 हफ्ते के लिए, तो आप लोगों से दरखास्त है कि दुआ में याद रखिएगा। दूसरे ये कि जो मेजॉरिटेरियन और डेमोक्रेसी की बात हो रही थी, उसमें एक पहलू है, वो बड़ा इम्पोर्टेंट है कि डेमोक्रेसी का एक एस्पेक्ट है प्रोटेक्शन ऑफ द माइनॉरिटीज। तो वो उसको हम नजरअंदाज नहीं कर सकते। तो इसीलिए माइनॉरिटीज के लिए बल्कि स्पेशल प्रोविजन, दैट इज डेमोक्रेसी। डेमोक्रेसी डजंट मीन it depends on how you define. Again, people, we define.
There's a book actually that I wrote with various others in 2016 called Conflicted Democracies, where I talk about India as a conflicted democracy because of its failure to uphold precisely the principles that you're underscoring. Yes.
So that aspect we have to always remember. That's democracy all over the world. Thank you.
रजाउल्लाह साहब, आप अंगना जी की बुक को ले जा करके प्राइम मिनिस्टर को दे दीजिएगा।
किनकी? हमारे
जी, हमारी अंगना जी जो अभी आज
जी भाई, इनके लिए हमने बहुत कोशिश की थी। यहाँ हमारे सईद साहब हमारे पीछे लग जाते हैं, जब ऐसा होता है तो शिकागो में इनको मीटिंग करने की आई थी, लेकिन अब वहाँ शॉर्ट नोटिस था। यहाँ आपको पता है इतनी।
Are you inviting her to Chicago?
Oh, anytime. एंड अब एक सिलसिले में ये बता दूं कि मैं बहुत लेट स्टेज में कश्मीर के साथ थे, हमारी यंगर जनरेशन। फॉर मी एवरीबॉडी इज यंगर ओवर 80। तो वो ही unfortunately a wonderful brilliant person, we lost him within this time. I think it was around May. She came to Milwaukee on the invitation of a professor who is also from Kashmir, and we were trying to, on a short notice, Saeed, he asked me, can we do something here? To me and Imtiaz Bhai, we worked on it, and I did hard, but we were not able to put together enough people because on a short notice, because there are a lot of things going on in Chicago.
About
So,
whom? About whom you are talking about?
Angana ji.
Anjana ji, Anjana ji.
Ang-
Angana ji.
No, I'm sorry. She, you know,
You are confused, I think. Maybe.
no, I'm sorry. She looks very similar to her. We have heard her. उनका क्या नाम है जो जर्नलिस्ट?
Oh, Anuradha Bhasin.
Anuradha Bhasin.
Yeah, she was here on the platform, and I met Dr.
अंजना जी को पहले भी यहाँ सुना है, हाँ पहले भी आपके फोरम पर सुना है, और उनको हाँ आप ही ने उस वक्त शायद कहा था कि वो आपके फोरम में आ रही हैं. I'm sorry about that, but on Kashmir issue, she's very good. So
Okay, Raja Saab.
again,
You should
Have a
invite
nice day.
Angana directly to Chicago.
I call myself, a definition of senior now is 66. I think I say anybody over 80 is super senior. So I am super senior. So pardon me.
You have no
Raja
right to
Saab,
call
have a
yourself super
wonderful
senior.
stay.
You don't know how
Wonderful
old I
stay in
am.
India.
आप अपनी एज को अभी मत बताइए, जाने दीजिए. You look very young. Okay. So
I'm doing fine, but
No, age is only a number in my mind. It is only a number.
आप बच्चे हैं महाराज.
all the best, Rajaullah Sahab, for your trip to India.
Yeah.
Thank
Have a
you.
Be
nice,
safe.
nice
Be
time
well.
there.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks
Thank
again.
you all.
So hoping I can do something good there. Something
Okay.
good.
Hafiz.
That's the intention. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, bye. Thank you again, both speakers. Thank you.
The best thing you could do is go eat biryani there, and not the other biryani, the vegetarian biryani, to be safe side. Okay. Thank you very much. Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely.
Thank you
you.
very much, Amarjit. And we will see you again sometime. Okay.
Sure. Bye-bye.
See you. Bye-bye.